Hello, my name is Wolfgang Resch. I'm a research computing engineer with CIQ, and today I'm going to give you a tutorial on how to submit and run your existing Nextflow pipelines on Fuzzball. First, a couple of definitions. What is Fuzzball? Fuzzball is CIQ's container-first performance-intensive computing platform, which combines a workflow execution engine with services that help you provision and maintain the infrastructure that you need to execute those workflows. And it does so in local deployments on the cloud and in hybrid environments. What is Nextflow? Nextflow is an open source workflow execution engine. It's used heavily in the biomedical science, and built on top of Nextflow is a large set of best practices workflows maintained by the NF Core community that cover a lot of common research analytic workflows in the biomedical science, like, for example, RNA sequencing analysis, variant calling for somatic and germline variants, assembly of large genomes, metagenomics, and epigenomics. And our goal is to make it possible for users of Nextflow and in general, and NF Core pipelines in particular, to run their pipelines on their Fuzzball provisioned infrastructure. And to that end, today we present an initial release of a Fuzzball executor for Nextflow. This is still early development, so we have plans for improvements, but you can already execute full NF Core pipelines with this plugin. And in the next slide, I'm going to show you how you would go about doing this today. Okay. To start with, submission of Nextflow pipelines today requires a submission script. We will obtain just a submission script from the NF Fuzzball plugin plugin repository that includes all the code required to run Nextflow pipelines on Fuzzball. Okay, so this will get us the script. Next, the script depends on a couple of Python packages. We're going to use Python virtual environment, a Python venv, to install those two packages, but any of the tools that you like to use to manage your Python environments will work just fine. The two packages that are required are PyYAML and requests, so it's a very simple environment. We are using Python 3.13. I think everything down to 3.12 or 3.10 should work. Okay, so let's create that local environment, and then we will activate it and install PyYAML and requests. Once we have that, we can now run with the environment activated the submit Nextflow script. First, let's just look at the help message. So you can see that the structure of this is basically a script that takes a few options to tell it how to interact with Fuzzball, followed by a relatively unmodified Nextflow command that you would use that is very similar to what you would use if you were running Nextflow locally or with a traditional HPC scheduler backend. Before we can actually run the script, we do need a Fuzzball context activated. For this, we need the Fuzzball command line interface installed. Here's the URL that tells you how to do that for your particular system. And the command would be Fuzzball context login, but I'm not actually executing this because I already have an active context. Next, we run the actual command. In this particular case, we are going to only do a dry run because I've already submitted this workflow, and we're going to show what this looks like later on. But as I mentioned before, the structure is the script followed by some options that tell it how to interact with Fuzzball. In this case, what do I want to name the main job that's submitting, that is running Nextflow and submitting subtasks. We also have to tell it that we're running an NF core pipeline because NF core requires some special settings for Nextflow. And in this case, we're doing a dry run, which will just dump out the Fuzzball workflow as it would be run if we had submitted it, followed by double dashes and then a normal Nextflow command. In this case, we will be running the NF core pipeline RNASeq. We have to tell it to use a Fuzzball profile. The Fuzzball profile contains all the information and code required to submit tasks as Fuzzball jobs. And we're also telling it to use the test profile, which includes a small test data set, a small genome, and so on. And then we're specifying a path on Fuzzball storage where to store the output. And again, because this is a dry run, we will just look at the output, and you can see that it generates essentially a Fuzzball workflow that runs Nextflow, which then in turn submits jobs to the Fuzzball cluster that it's running on. Okay, now that we've submitted this, we can go and look what this actually looks like in the Fuzzball interface. When we first come over to the Fuzzball interface, we can see that the submission script has started the main Fuzzball job. In this case, we're still setting up the storage, transferring files, obtaining the Nextflow container, and we will revisit this in a few minutes when the actual processing has started. Okay, so we're back a few minutes later now, and you can see that the actual Nextflow main controller job has started now. And we can look at it, and we can see the logs, and let's look at all of them. And you can see that it started running the NF core RNASeq pipeline, and here it is submitting, starting all the tasks. And if we go back to the list of workflows, we can now see that we're running we're running about 10 tasks concurrently. I think that was the number of jobs that I set it to run concurrently. So this will run through the entire pipeline until it's done, and then we can reconvene when that's completed and look at the outputs. Okay, we're back. After a little bit, the Nextflow pipeline execution for this NF core RNAseq pipeline finished. For those of you with good eyes, you'll notice that this is actually a different workflow ID because we had to restart the pipeline once due to reasons completely unrelated to either the Nextflow or the Nextflow plugin. You see the pipeline completed successfully. Again, this is the log from the main controller job, with 130 jobs reusing results from a previous run, and 79 tasks that were actually run as part of this execution of the pipeline. And again, each of those runs as a separate Fuzzball workflow. And because this is just a normal NF core pipeline run, you get all the usual outputs. You get the QC report, you get a Nextflow report that shows basic statistics like runtimes, resource usage, and so on. And you can get a timeline of the execution. So in essence, this is just a regular execution in Nextflow pipeline, which is the goal of this whole project, but it was using resources provisioned by Fuzzball. Okay, so that was a basic overview of how you can run Nextflow pipelines on Fuzzball. And let me go back and talk a little bit more about future plans. There is still improvements to be made for efficiency and execution. In particular, we're looking at batching multiple tasks into a single Fuzzball workflow, which should help with workflow execution. We're also going to make this into a easily installable, for the command line submission, we're going to make this into an easily installable Python package. And we will also be making this into an entry in the Fuzzball workflow catalog, which is essentially a pre-canned set of applications that you can run directly from the Fuzzball graphical user interface. So you should be able to submit your Nextflow pipelines directly from the GUI if you prefer that over command line submission. And we will also be working on improving some aspects of storage, in particular remote storage handling. Okay, well, that concludes our tutorial, and we will see you when the next version comes out and there's hopefully new and exciting features. Thank you very much for your attention.